they're so just charming.
And I would not be surprised if this or something like this hasn't happened before in their lives.
The result is the dog is either going to be cool with you or it's going to rip you to shreds.
And there's those times in life where you say, I just need to make it past this point.
I'm an older brother, and you never want your younger brother to see you fail. I'm not going to define my reunion with my brother by my failure. Hey everybody, welcome back. We are recapping The Last of Us Season 1, and today we're going to be recapping Episode 6 of Season 1 of The Last of Us. Evan, how you doing?
Hey, now that we're free from Kathleen and headed west, I know you're doing a lot better. I'm doing great. Looking forward to discussing this episode with you.
I really didn't realize how much I disliked Kathleen until I went back and listened to those last two episodes.
You were burdened by her leadership style, and even though it's a post-apocalyptic setting, you were not okay with her means of seizing power and managing her populace.
And now that we have unburdened ourselves from what has been, I am so excited to move on, to move west into the great unknown. So this episode, Evan, this is one of my favorite episodes because it shows some character development. It shows some just freedom again, I guess. But like, I don't know. It's like the biggest episode for humanity and the humanity of these characters that I think that we've gotten so far, at least with Joel and Ellie.
The setting of that the characters find themselves in is always pretty emblematic of what they're going to endure in the episode and kind of how open-ended or open the possibilities seem or not. When they're in the cities, things seem kind of linear. There's more of a path that they take that's kind of through the streets and the back alleys and the tunnels, and the characters kind of feel like the walls are closing in. And then we get these travel episodes where the sky is open above them. They're out in the wintertime. There's been a bit of a time skip, and you can tell that the characters mirror the openness of the setting. And so it's really well shot, too, where you feel a lot of headroom when they're traveling together and they're seeming like they're a little more open in conversations and connecting with each other. And this episode absolutely starts it that way as well. So we open up with this scene, and there's this cabin, and we meet this old couple. And that's kind of our cold open for this episode, is they're walking in, and Joel is standing there and has this woman we perceive to be this elderly man's wife at gunpoint. And you think maybe it's going to start with the significant amount of tension and fear, but it actually turns quite charming and comedic pretty quickly. Tell us about this scene with this old couple.
This couple, they're so just charming in the midst of just this disastrous backdrop of a post-apocalyptic world. And Joel is like interrogating them, like, hey, where are the fireflies? Have you heard of somebody named Tommy? I mean, all of these questions. And we are introduced to Joel's interrogation tactics when he's got two people, where it's like, hey, she's already told me what I need to know, but I'm confirming it with you. And then he just looks at his wife and says, did you tell him the truth? Yeah. Are you telling me the truth? Yeah. And so that's kind of the way to get around it. But I love the framework of Joel being just this gruff, angry, business-only sort of person. He's just kind of caught off guard by these very normal, genuine people.
You can tell that the wife wants to laugh the whole time. Like, she's holding it in. And so she's at gunpoint, and her husband walks in, and he's obviously concerned. But I do wonder if he's not that concerned. Yeah. And I would not be surprised if this or something like this hasn't happened before in their lives. In this way, though, it almost feels like they're having the same reaction as they're catching maybe their child sneaking back into the house together.
Yeah.
There's kind of this playful, there's obviously a little bit of seriousness to it. There are some firearms involved, but the way that he raises his eyebrows towards his wife when he hears Ellie come in from the back background really makes it kind of like a more familial post-apocalyptic atmosphere here while they navigate their way in their direction west. Why do you think they chose to open this show with this scene? We're not going to meet these folks again, but it does tell us a little bit about our characters in the world.
Well, it shows the contrast for sure between these two characters who are just having a life together in the middle of nowhere, in the snowy country lands, and the juxtaposition between these two characters that are deeply, closely, just comfortable and familial with each other, with Joel and Ellie, who really haven't developed that yet. It kind of lets us know where their gaps are and where we may be going in this episode. And certainly Joel and Ellie become closer as a result of this episode.
Well, before they get where they're going, Ellie steals the rabbit that this guy has hunted off.
Listen, she's a survivor.
She just grabs it and slings it over her shoulder, and they're
Should have grabbed two.
Well, that's what she says, is they kind of go out and they talk by this campfire, and they get to know each other a little bit. There's some pretty poignant moments in conversation that kind of build on each other as they work their way west. But they get to... I don't really know, the river, right? There's
river of Death.
Yeah, there's this river.
That's what she keeps calling it, yeah.
They cross this bridge under this river of death, and they get to the other side, and then they're very much alive. And then they're not even threatened. So Ellie, pretty much right after they cross the bridge and don't get shot at or attacked by a bloater or anything like that, she starts cracking jokes, and she's obviously too comfortable on the other side of the river. You can tell that Joel's still a little wary because he kind of heeds the warning from the old man. But then they get rode up on by a group of people on horseback, and they have this dog. Tell us about this dog scene and what this does here as they kind of test Joel and Ellie.
You know, it's the whole, are they infected, are they not? And without the technical equipment that that Fedra would have, they're using a dog to smell out the infected, which I think is a really interesting thing. Also, immediate repercussions, because the result is the dog is either going to be cool with you or it's going to rip you to shreds. I mean, this is it. He can smell out the infection. He's going to get you. And so there's this huge tension, not really for Joel's safety, but for Ellie's, because she's infected. But is the dog going to pick up on that? And gosh, it's just brilliant tension that I don't think another whatever it is, radar. It's not radar. What's it called? Some
it's
test,
like a scanner.
A scanner sort of thing is going to do in the same way. So I thought it was really good with just like that added level of tension. And Ellie's just behind Joel. Their hands are up. And it's like, is Ellie about to be just like ripped to shreds? So I don't know. It's a great part.
Well, and we do meet a pretty important character for the sake of the story here. We just don't know that we've met them. Her face is behind a mask while she's riding out on the horse. But you can tell through her eyes that this character recognizes Joel, probably. She's got this kind of knowing look where she's anticipating. She can tell, oh, this is a gruff character. And maybe some of the mannerisms seem familiar to her in a way that we'll find out. But they pass the test, and they get them on a horse, and they kind of ride back towards settlement. And then we see these walls of logs. It's very organized. And as the gates kind of open, it's kind of normal.
Yeah. We get a glimpse of real life. You know, they've made a life, they've made a home for themselves out here in Jackson, and it's a society. And it's like I said at the top of the episode, it's the first glimpse of like real humanity as it was in the world before everything fell. You know, and I think it's really cool because Joel and Ellie don't know how to act, so they kind of walk in and ride in. And Joel sees Tommy and yells for him. I mean, it's like Pedro Pascal does a great job of just blurting out this emotional sort of desperation of like, that's my brother. That's the one that I've been looking for. And so just this reunion becomes really powerful to everybody there.
Yeah, we don't get a lot of strong initial reactions out of Joel. He's either very assertive in violence, but he's not usually very assertive in affection or praise or conversation. And so you can kind of tell that he's relieved to see his brother. He
is.
didn't know if his brother was still alive. But there's also this other side of relief where you can start to tell that maybe he's feeling the burden of his charge of Ellie that he's responsible for. Maybe he's going to have a little bit of help and support. And there's those times in life where you say, I just need to make it past this point. I think when we're in school, there's always those times where you have like that week where you'd have that overlapping paper and then 2 tests that week and then a quiz. And so you just say to yourself, if I can just get through this week, then I can rest a little bit. If I can just find the way to manage all of these responsibilities, all these things that are overlapping, this is a stressful season, but if I can just get to this point, then I can kind of exhale and sit down and take a breath. And it does certainly seem like when he sees Tommy, he kind of feels this. What do you think Joel's going through here? And how does that relate to the ways that we kind of look forward to these big moments to get past in our life?
I think it goes back to one of the conversations that Joel and Ellie has in this episode when Ellie's like, so, they find a vaccine, they take my blood, whatever. Then what? What's life going to be like? And he's like, isolation. I'm going to be on a farm. So much land.
Sheep. They don't
take
talk
care of
back.
sheep. They don't talk back. I love that. So I think that all of us have this idea of what we will do when we've done the thing, right? When we've accomplished the goal that we've set in life, or we were past finals for a lot of my students. When we hit that point, what will life be like? And we oftentimes lionize what it's going to be. It becomes this whole like idyllic scenario of it's all rainbows and butterflies at that moment. And here, Joel gets to the moment of like, what would I do once I found Tommy? And it's like,
right.
It's almost like I can't even like fathom this because for 20 years or however long, this has been the goal, and it's also made up a great deal of my identity. And so I think that most of us probably would be in that same boat of, if my identity has been on attaining the goal, once I attain the goal, who am I? And what am I going to do? There's a lostness that begins to happen there. And I think that's why we begin to see Joel break in this episode. A little bit more. He's showing a little bit more of a tender side, an emotional beat.
Well, it's a very dynamic scene because rather than him just feeling safe and comfortable and being more emotional with his brother, we get that scene where they're reunited. Joel's kind of trying to figure it out. He's wondering maybe why Tommy's gone dark on the radio, what's been going on. There's a moment where he wants to have a family-only discussion, and Tommy lets him know, well, actually, this is my wife, and this is the same character that had seemingly had some intuition that Joel might be who he says he is, and could tell that he was maybe related to Tommy, who's now her husband. And so the family dynamic has changed because family is a big, important thing for Joel, and we assume that it's still important for Tommy, but we haven't seen Tommy since the very, very beginning. We haven't seen Tommy for 20-something years in the show. And so you could assume that that value is there. Now, Joel isn't going to immediately trust Tommy's wife here, even though she's, quote, family, says Tommy. But Tommy has these attachments, these same familial attachments that Joel uses to justify a lot of his actions, and he's applying them to his wife. So they're at odds here a little bit. There's a new influence in Tommy's life, and things have changed a little bit from just what Joel needs. But Joel is pretty quick to communicate what his needs are, and as they've trusted each other, they have this kind of more private conversation later, and Tommy just asks, oh, how's Tess doing? And you're thinking maybe Joel's going to be really honest here, and this is going to be the connection, and he's going to tell him everything that happens. And Joel lies to Tommy and just says, oh, she's good, and then brushes past it. So we're like, okay, Joel's really going to be safe here. He's finally going to open up. And then he tells this a pointless lie. One, why do you think that he lied about Tess to Tommy? And what does just that small moment in the middle of these conversations do to really set the stage for what's about to happen next?
It's hard to say. I tend to kind of transfer my own experience over to Joel. I think we all kind of do that to a degree. But in this case, I'm an older brother, and you never want your younger brother to see you fail or feel like you failed. And so Joel has one job, and it's keeping Tess okay, the person he cares about okay. And to say that he failed again after Sarah died, he wasn't able to protect her, to say it again, and now he's got Ellie. There's just a lot of pressure on him, and it feels like if I fail this, then what am I good for? And he later on breaks down and says that. He's like, I'm good at one thing, and it's failing. And so I think that's probably why it's just like I'm not going to define my reunion with my brother by my failure.
It does definitely feel I'm not going to define my reunion with my brother by my failure. That's It does feel like this is spilling out a little bit. Joel is not maybe as in control as he has been or wants to be of some of his emotions, and he's starting to confront the reality of his age, his experience, and the fact that he's rolled the dice quite a few times, and at some point that dice roll is not going to come up in his favor.
Right.
Tommy says something to Joel that I think illustrates some of the journey that Tommy has been on, and they do it really pretty quickly, and they're efficient with the dialogue and setting this up. They're talking about the things that they did, and Joel is talking about the justifications. We talked about utilitarianism, and Tommy says there were other ways to do what we did. We just weren't any good at them.
Yeah.
Which is Joel language back to Joel, but it's more evolved, it's more processed, it's more mature. Tommy's clearly had a little bit more safety to be able to actually experience some of the processing of what they've been through. What do you make of that juxtaposition and kind of what they've been through and how it's going to impact their approaches as they talk about this charge of Ellie and maybe what could be next?
It strikes me that Tommy has gotten on with his life and Joel is stuck, much like the watch that he wears. He's just stuck in time. And so the things that worked out of necessity back then did not require him to grow. He was able to just do those things. And it wasn't enough for Tommy. Tommy wanted a life. Tommy didn't just want to live in the shadow of the biggest losses that he had had. And so I think that Joel is seeing in Tommy a life that he doesn't view as sustainable because it's fragile. Yeah. He lost everything when he was living like Tommy is currently living. And so the best way to fight against that is to detach and to decouple from every significant value add relationship, sense of security that you've got, because the only security that you've really got is what you're in control of, yourself, your health, which is failing for Joel, which I think is adding a whole other dynamic to the thing.
Yeah, we're not sure if Joel's body is physically failing him or if his psyche is cracking a little bit.
Well, it's definitely his body too.
Some combination of both.
His hand is also fractured. And you see it when he's crafting with his foot and with his shoe and stuff. And I think that all of it together, there's a fracture in his psyche, there's a fracture in his hand. And these two things are giving him this self-doubt that is like, when we have catalysts in life that make us feel weak or feel vulnerable, we suddenly analyze everything that brought us to that point through that lens. And so Joel is like, I feel weak right now. I don't feel up to the task. And the kind of dark talk that we give to ourselves is, well, I've always been weak because Sarah died, Tess died, Ellie's next.
Yeah. Wow. Well, he only has one tool in his toolbox to deal with everything in his life, and it's just sheer determination, apparently. And you said the things that he did out of necessity didn't require him to grow.
No.
I think that's a really interesting statement there, because we see that Tommy had to grow because he's in a relationship. He has to live in a society, and having that functional society requires some more trade-offs, and it requires a different kind of determination, because if it's just this kind of domineering zero-sum game, there can only be one winner. It's really hard to have those trade-offs that are necessary for that kind of community that Tommy's living in. And so Joel is not ready to adjust into this there. What do you make of that?
Well, it's different to live on your own, on the land, by your own hand, versus to be a part of a community, because it demands that you contribute, not just the value of your craft, but also to give of yourself. You have to contribute a portion of yourself to the community, and that immediately drops your defenses. And I think that that's a huge thing with Joel here. He's doing it with Ellie, and he's very guarded with this community. Maybe because he's got some previous dissension with Maria as well, Tommy's wife, because they're married. I was like, are they engaged? No, it's married. But he's got this tension there, so it's like, I don't know where I fit in here. It's like y'all are going on. I'm putting words in Joel's mind and mouth here, but it's like y'all have gone on with life, and like we're not in the same world, but y'all are pretending like you are, and it's causing all these kind of flashbacks. I don't know.
Joel's very back and forth here, and it seems like it's always determined by his level of confidence, whether it's pretend confidence or it's his actual determination, or if he's just putting one foot in front of the other or punching one fist after the other as he works his way through life. That however he feels internally and his confidence is going to impact that. And he is as fragile as we've seen him really here in a long time. And there's a couple nods to the game that I think are good to mention. We talk about the crafting where he's fixing his shoes with the duct tape. You don't fix your shoes with duct tape, but you collect supplies and do those things. So he's kind of
duct tape throughout the game.
Yeah, you got it covered. It's showing that his equipment is wearing out, I think, as a mirror to kind of his psyche and his psychological state. It's starting to wear out. And there's not enough duct tape that he can put on his emotional state to kind of keep him from cracking here as he goes by.
Only so much that duct tape and scissors can do for you. You know?
It's so true.
Unlike in the game.
It's so true.
They heal myriad wounds in the game, but not here.
Well, the other thing that to talk about is Ellie asked Tommy if he can teach her how to use the sniper rifle, and we'll see later in the scene that Joel teaches Ellie how to use the sniper rifle. But in the game, there's this little sniper tutorial where you play as Ellie, and you kind of hunt these infected, and Tommy and Joel are kind of there with you while you're doing it, or maybe just Tommy is. So that's, I would imagine, just a little bit of a reference back to the game. They try and drop those in when they can.
Yeah.
So we then get this scene where Ellie is getting somebody who care for her in a way that somebody who's only experienced and has like a little bit of lived experience can care for you, as there's another woman who's interested in being kind to her, and she hasn't had that female influence in that way. Maybe since Boston, but did she ever really even have that in Boston? We don't know a ton about her history. We're going to find some in the flashback episode that's coming up next. We'll learn a little bit more about Ellie's journey there. But she's given a Diva Cup, which she doesn't understand, but then she's looking at the instructions and she goes, oh, as if she's being kind of educated about her own self, and things are starting to make a little sense. And so you get this moment where Maria walks in, and there's two names on a chalkboard above the mantle, and there's a great interaction between Ellie and Maria here. Let's talk about the names on the chalkboard and what you make of this scene and their connection, as it's going to be important as the story goes on.
Well, the names on the chalkboard, you're going to have to talk about that one because it didn't strike me this time, this watch through. So what was on the chalkboard?
Oh, the names on the chalkboard are another name and then a name that's Sarah. So it's Sarah. The day that they were born and died. And so it seems to us that two children were lost. And so it communicates to us that Maria has lost a child as well, probably, because we know Sarah, but Sarah's name is on the right. So there was another name on the left. And so this whole time, as Ellie and Maria are talking, there's this idea of when are we going to find out about this other name on the chalkboard here? And there's a moment of personal hygiene. Actually, this whole scene is about personal hygiene, apparently. And Maria says, hey, listen, let me cut your hair. And Ellie's like, absolutely no way. And Maria disarms her and says, just the trim, just the split ends. We're just gonna do that. And so they're sitting at the salon, essentially, in the living room, where a lot of conversation happens in society, and we learn a little bit about Maria's life, but Maria lets something slip about Joel's life that Ellie wasn't quite aware of. And there's these moments in life where we get these confirmations where someone else let something slip that maybe we knew in our hearts, but it hadn't been explicitly confirmed for us. A lot of the time it has to do with like families past or friends and their history, but it's a tender moment, and Maria handles it delicately. But what does it confirm for Ellie, and what do you think she's thinking?
Well, it's clear that Maria does not love Joel, and especially what Joel didn't do to Tommy, but how Joel impacted and affected Tommy during their early years of survival. And so Maria's trying to move past all of that. And so because of the things that Joel had done, killed people and all of that, she's warning Ellie. And Ellie knew that, he's killed people. He's done worse. I mean, he doesn't kill good people anymore, but just bad. So Maria kind of drops the bomb that Joel had lost his daughter, Sarah. And this is the first time that Ellie has heard this stuff. She'd heard this stuff about Joel, hurting people and doing all kinds of things in order to survive and to smuggle and all that kind of stuff. But here she realizes this relationship with Sarah and the grief that Joel kind of has. And, we don't really get a full reflective moment for Ellie, but it's clear that she's processing it because it comes up in a later conversation.
Yeah, it's enough. It's that little bit of confirmation that something that she knew all along, but Joel had really never confirmed. And it's kind of how secrets go like that sometimes. If you're keeping a secret from somebody that is something that should be obvious that they know, but you haven't told that, Joel hasn't had a lot of people to weave this tangled web with, and there really haven't been a lot of people who know anything about him to reveal any of the secrets from his past. And so he's really struggling with his charge, and he has this kind of, let's go back to Joel's breakdown in his conversation with Tommy. He talks a lot about failure. He said, my whole life has been defined by failure here. Why is Joel feeling ill-equipped here, and what is he asking Tommy to do as he's trying to figure out what's going to happen as they continue their journey?
Well, if deep down all of his attachments have ended in failure. And this is also, by the way, why he is upset and kind of giving an outburst to Tommy about having a kid. It's like, typically a brother would say to his soon-to-be brother, hey, congratulations, you're going to be a great dad. But he is just completely tuned out and turned off to this notion of building further attachments because it's going to lead to vulnerability and bargaining chips and just all that kind of stuff. Because
not a lot of
what he's been through,
Not a lot of great questions coming from Joel. Joel is very selfish in the way that he approaches this. He's not interested in learning more about what's going on with Tommy. He wants to pick back up with Tommy with whatever they were before, and he's not nearly as engaged with his brother in what's been going on in his life. He's just still concerned with his own journey, and he's been through a lot, but we get a sense that there's an imbalance there in the way that they're doing that.
Well, and we oftentimes want to go back to the last good thing that happened in our lives, or the last good season in our lives, and that's what Joel wants. He wants his brother back from 20 years ago. He wants that relationship, and the closest thing to it is kind of like, and maybe you're at this age now, Evan, but like for most of us, there's a, I don't know who said it, but somebody said, men tend to always dress in the same style of the last year that they felt cool. And I found that to kind of be the case. And you look around and it's like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. That's why you're wearing cargo shorts, and that's why you're doing that. Like, I get it. Like, those are out of style, but you felt cool back then, so you're trying to reconjure that. And I think that to a degree, Joel is kind of doing that. I want to get back to the last season that I was okay. And emotionally, we all try to do that. When was the last time I was okay?
And Maria's locked in on this too, because it is the post-apocalyptic version of I don't like you when you're hanging out with your old college buddies.
Oh, isn't that the truth?
Right? Except when
it's very similar.
Except probably a little more murder in this case. She doesn't want she doesn't want Tommy to devolve back into, they're not going out to the bar or anything like that.
I don't like the murder you do when you're with your brother.
Right, exactly. So Maria clearly knows a lot about Tommy and Joel's past based on their communication, and she is extremely wary, and she is starting to become wary for Ellie. She's trying to do what she can to manage the situation within the context, and she's typically very tactful in her approach. She's very gentle as she kind of opens up these wounds and starts to explore to kind of figure out where those motivations lie, and those motivations come to a crashing conflict upstairs in the bedroom as Joel and Ellie kind of talk. As Joel's gonna just let Ellie know probably what's gonna happen and just continue to tell her what to do. Things do not go so well, and it ends with a very good door slam, which you don't get a ton of good.
Anytime there's a good door slam, I mean, that's like the mic drop moment. In a world without mics, you have to slam a door. So. Yeah. Ellie, the thing that I love about Ellie and the thing that Bella does so well, I think that the game Ellie does this well too, but Bella really accentuates it and emphasizes it. Ellie does not let there be ambiguity. If there is a Band-Aid that needs to be ripped off, she's going to rip it off. And maybe like induce a little bit of blood to make sure that you realize that she ripped it off. And I love that about this character. Nothing is going to just be passed by, either because she's never experienced this before, having grown up in a post-apocalyptic world, or she just doesn't have time for this sort of like frivolity and ambiguity and stuff. So she's going to call it out, and so she does that with Joel. She overheard enough of the conversation between him and Tommy to realize that he's ditching me, and she calls him out on it. It's like, are you here to just ditch me? Or do you care about me? And Joel says, well, of course I do. And she says, you think that you're protecting me. You think that I'm going to be safer, but I would just be more scared with anyone except you at this point. And I think that is like the gut punch that Joel kind of needed to hear. She also says, I'm not your daughter. I'm not Sarah. And that's a heavy hitting blow. And that's when Joel is like, you better watch yourself. You better stop. And immediately builds up those walls. Yeah. But what's said has been said. He can build up the walls, but the infection is already in.
They've been talking around that for months and episodes. And when she says it directly, in a lot of ways, too, it's because she's not getting through with her logic. Yeah. So if we look at the structure of this argument, and this is how it happens, I think, a lot of the time, is Joel comes in and he's prepared to talk about why this is the right course of action. This is how I feel, this is my state, and this is why I need to transfer this charge, that is you, the cargo charge, to Tommy, because he's going to be better. He's better equipped to handle this task. And Ellie responds by saying, okay, here's all your facts and then the opinions behind them. Well, here's my preference. Yeah. Here's my facts. This is what it means to me. And she asserts her right and ability to have her own opinions and emotions and experience and perspective. Joel is not willing to receive it. He can't. And when he can't receive it and she's not getting through, then she lashes out and she says, yeah, I'm not your daughter. And I wonder if we could talk for a second about the way that conversations kind of spiral in life around these things. Here's my logical, I'm calm, you're calm. Most things don't start off with the screaming match and the doors slamming, but they kind of spiral. And sometimes you find yourself in conversations in this tornado where it feels like the things in the room are flying around you. And that's when those statements, hey, I'm not your daughter, I'm going to say the thing that I think is really going to punch through this wall that you've put up here. Let's talk about those conversations, how we get into them, and why this is such a good example of it, and why it's not good to slam doors, even if it feels good.
I think that most people, when they want to solve a problem, whether it's getting cargo from one place to another or whatever, they immediately begin with addressing the immediate thing. So they're going to correct something. But when you're dealing with people, particularly, they're not necessarily a problem to be solved. I say not necessarily because I'm also watching The Pit right now, which is a fantastic show over
medical
on
drama for those
HBO medical drama. It's like 24 meets ER. And there is an urgency there where you have to depersonalize. And this is a project. I've got to stitch somebody up. I've got to, bring them to a place of survival. I can't really think about the human implication of this because I've got a job to do. For most of us, when we want a quick fix, we have to depersonalize and, again, decouple the person from the project. And Joel has been doing that for 3 months with Ellie. And Ellie's had enough of it. Things escalate when we continue to consider someone or a relationship with someone in terms of tasks, obligation, responsibility, and they don't have a say-so in it. And so to move away from that correction, or at least to build the foundation so you can make quick pivots as needed, you have to be able to listen and learn and to teach and communicate. You have to build a relationship, and you have to be good with the people that matter to someone else. You have to integrate two different worlds into one. And what it ultimately means is that you've got to stop thinking of the other person as the other, or a category of responsibility or cargo in Joel's case. You got to start thinking of them as a living being that can make their own decisions and choices and have agency and resistance and all of that. I will tell you this. It is easier to go through life thinking of the people that are near you as cargo. You can carry them through life. It is easier to do that. However, it is deeply unsatisfying to do so. It's a utilitarian objectification of other people that really just kind of serves your own end. It is more vulnerable and risk-taking to identify them as being kind of out of your control. And yet, it is also the place where we find fulfillment and belonging and the truest form of love and humanity.
Let's talk about Ellie's agency. It's a theme that is one that runs throughout the show, and it's something that somebody brought up in the comments on the interview that we did with Dr. Gleason, a biomedical ethicist.
Right.
And we talked about, we wish that we had had more time to talk about Ellie's agency, and I think we're going to spend a lot more time unpacking it as we get into the later episodes, but I think it's a good check-in point at this point in the story to talk about that, because we get a little bit of that dynamic explored before the big choice that comes to Ellie's agency here. They are conveniently drifting, as relationships do, in and out of different roles here, where they're cargo and then transportation delivery driver and cargo, but also then father and daughter. And
so it's cargo and companion, I think.
There you go.
I love alliteration.
As they try and do that. And so Ellie is, I think, the way that it's portrayed in the show, she is, when she feels safe and it's convenient for her to want to feel like a child and a daughter, she says, this is what my needs are, I'm here. But then there's those moments where Joel doesn't act like a father, and so when she doesn't get what she would expect there, she goes to her kind of apocalyptic sense. So you get this, they're far apart, and then you get these moments where they're together, but it's those misalignments where when Joel's approaching it like a father and Ellie wants to be more kind of feral and apocalyptic, then they have conflict. When Ellie's looking for a father figure and Joel's feeling a little more raw in that kind of apocalyptic survival state, then you get these big conflicts. And so those are pretty similar to how those misalignments can happen in life and in those conversations. And as the door slams and we wake up the next morning, we're left to wonder, what decision are they going to make? Are they going to change their minds? Have they processed? And as Ellie goes to leave, we see that Joel is either seeing her off or might have changed his mind. Let's talk about that conversation that happens there, and then that what Joel says to Ellie that she deserves a certain thing that we haven't really let her have before.
Joel says, you deserve a choice. And that matters. He's clearly been stewing over it all night long, her words. And so, he's untying a horse and he's like, I thought about stealing one. Tommy's like, I'd have given it to you. But he's like, really, this is what it is. You deserve a choice. And before he can get out another word, Ellie throws her backpack at him and says, let's go. And so it's like, yeah, absolutely. This is obviously what I want. So, and they go. And it really does begin the change in their dynamic. And you see it on the road moving forward. You see it in their final conversations throughout this episode. So just a great pivot, and they don't linger on it too long. It's just like, you know everything you need to know because he gave her a choice, and she's now become a companion, not cargo.
Yeah, he conveniently decides when he thinks Ellie deserves a choice and when she doesn't. And
well,
this is
as we will see, yeah.
That he kind of says it out loud. You deserve a choice. And then he's going to decide that she doesn't before, and then she does. And so I think the subtitle of this show could be, when is it appropriate that Ellie deserves a choice according to Joel, and when is it not? And so he's going to determine that because that's what he does. That's how he kind of seizes control of the situation. Right. Well, they're riding across, and they're getting to this university that they're going for. I think it's Colorado State that they're going west towards, because they're the Rams. Yeah. They're green, and they're the Rams, and it's out west. So I'm just going to assume it's Colorado State. And
correct us in the comments.
Look it up. And on the way, Joel kind of gives her a little bit of misinformation to make him look good, and says, people really looked up to contractors. Everybody loved contractors. They were the best. I was a contractor. We were the heroes of society. Contractors.
I loved a contractor. Yeah. Isn't that fun? Like, I love to be able to tell people that don't know things, like, my skewed version of history. And I think that Joel does that. I mean, she's a blank canvas. She doesn't know what the world was like before. Yeah. So, yeah. My best friend and I told his oldest daughter when she was little that seals were like baby whales. Like they were tadpoles for whales. And she believed that for the longest time. And it was great.
She trusted you, and you betrayed that trust.
I hope she still believes that. She's like in 8th grade now, but like I really hope that she thinks that seals become alligators. Well, I haven't gotten an angry call yet.
When it comes to marine biology, you've really messed that kid up. Otherwise, I think they're probably doing okay. So
it takes a village to mess up the kids.
Yeah, pick your lane. It does take a village. Well, as they get to the university, there's this sense that things aren't what they expected. There's not a lot of people milling around. It's pretty empty. They find out that the fireflies have moved. And so we realize that this is, once again, just like right outside of Boston. They've just missed them, but they do find evidence that there were doctors, and there's enough evidence that they say, okay, this is something serious. They were planning for this. This is important. And so it encourages them to continue their journey because they get another little bit of a breadcrumb to kind of keep them going. But then they peek out the window and there's some raiders there. So what does the university tell us before we get into this kind of fight as they exit the university?
Well, it says that they've relocated, but that they do have technology and stuff. What I love is Ellie's impression of it all, and the monkeys, the wonder of it. We're living in a world where she is just elementarily educated, and she just doesn't really understand all of this stuff, but she's seeing it. She's also, I think Joel says, a college is the place where people go to figure out what they want to do with their lives.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really, really cool because, that's kind of, again, playing into that choice idea. And like, has she ever been given a choice of what would I do with my life, which has been a recurring theme through here. But then when they realize that the fireflies have up and moved, they have to go too. And yet again chase down this goalpost that keeps moving, which is funny because they also talk about football, which Ellie doesn't understand. But then the Raiders attack, and
not the football Raiders.
Well, they would have been easily overcome, but these were harder Raiders. So.
If you're watching this in a time in the world where the Las Vegas Raiders are good at football, then
put it in the comments. We'd love to hear.
I think probably, though, the odds are good that whenever you're watching this, the Raiders probably still aren't good. So there you go.
Anyway, these Raiders, they strike and attack Joel and give a near fatal wound, and it panics Ellie. They're able to get on the horse and escape from these raiders. But what happens as the episode ends is this kind of traumatic cliffhanger of is Joel going to be okay? And Ellie, it shows just how deep her connection to Joel is. It's not just like, I don't want to be alone, but like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. In a world where you're finally giving me agency, I don't know what to do with that agency if you weren't here. So she still needs him as a guide, and she's panicking over the idea of like, I'm just lost in the darkness and in the cold here.
Yeah, she says, I can't do this without you.
Yeah.
In the beginning of the episode, when he has a panic / little bit of a heart attack, she goes, oh crap, are you dying? And so once again we get that at the end, but it's a very serious, you can't die on me, don't leave me. And for a teenager who is experiencing and exploring what boundaries are and agency, she's thrust then into the role of responsibility. They invert, where Joel becomes cargo and Ellie has responsibility, and the weight of that responsibility seems to be landing on her. And just like the landscape at the beginning of the scene, as we close, Joel is kind of fading to black here. We don't know what's going to happen. And there's Ellie alone in a big, open, wide landscape, and the shot kind of pans out. Really, I think, visually communicating a lot of that uncertainty that she's probably feeling now that she's gotten a little more agency than she probably wanted at this point.
Well, that's exactly it. And I think that there is, to translate it to a very universal sort of situation for everybody, there's always these moments when we are thrust into opportunity, agency, and responsibility before we feel ready. And so if anybody has ever lost someone or lost a relationship or somebody's moved or something like that, it never comes at the time you feel prepared. Never does. And I think for me, when my freshmen come onto campus and they enter into my class or one of my classes, their first semester, they are almost paralyzed to a degree about halfway through the semester by the choice they have. They are no longer on the same roadmap that they were given in first grade of like, you're going to make A's through 12th grade, and then you're going to get into Yale or whatever it is, and you're going to, become president by 25. Amazingly, like
not allowed,
but we would subvert it for you because you're the best. And that's kind of the trajectory they're on. And so once they get to college, however they got here, that roadmap kind of stops.
Yeah, there is no 13th grade.
There is no 13th grade. They have so much freedom. They don't have to go home at curfew time in the same way that they did in high school because nobody's checking up on them. And for some of my freshmen, that level of agency is crippling. And so that homesickness, that structure and stability starts to come in. And sometimes they look at their instructors and professors and they're like, hey, what do I do? Like I'm freaking out here. And it's like, you get to decide. And that's kind of the thing. And so Ellie, 14 years old, is thrust into this, I don't know what to do with my life. Now that I kind of think about it and say it out loud, I really think that is the theme of this episode. It's like, if you attain your goal, then what? What are you going to do with your life? And we have institutions in the real world where we figure that out. We have relationships that push us on, but you take away all of those things and like, what do you want to do? And that's, boy, what a huge existential question for all of us at every stage of our lives.
Well, that's well said. And the show mirrors, I think, what happens in real life when we experience that space to process that transition, because we're not going to figure out Joel's fate and what happens here until two episodes,
yes,
because
super
we get a flashback episode. So I think to mirror Ellie's processing and the burden of the situation that she's in, we're going to get to learn a little bit more about Ellie in this next episode. So Joel's fate is undetermined, and we won't necessarily know it completely next week. So be ready.
That's it. So that wraps up episode 6 of season 1 of The Last of Us. We're really excited to get into the next few episodes. We don't have too many left. I guess 3, 7, 8, and 9 as we finish up season 1, and then season 2 is coming. So continue to watch on Tuesday nights our live lecture play of the corresponding portion of the game to this episode, and then on Wednesday for a special discussion based on the themes and larger broad topics in The Last of Us. Make sure you check out our Discord, subscribe on this YouTube and podcasts, Spotify, Apple Music, all that stuff. But thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.
Something about darkness, looking for
Something
light.
about darkness and look for light.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks to Husky by the Geek for our theme music. Thanks to Nick Smith for our graphics. And as always, thanks to you. This program is brought to you by viewers like you, and we appreciate you. We'll see you on our next episode. Bye-bye.